Thanks for tuning in today. I'm Nicole Forbes with Genesis 70s, and we have a very special topic today for discussion, and that is collector indoor plants or rare tropical plants. And to help us kind of understand more about this growing genre of gardening and gardeners, we've got our indoor plant specialist and buyer Justin Reed here, and Justin is going to answer a lot of my questions, which hopefully are also your questions. But if you've got questions, feel free to type them into the comment screen, and we'll do our best to either answer them during the discussion today or afterwards. There is no handout that accompanies this topic, so we will put a link to like the collector section of our houseplant, of our rare houseplant subcategory. We're going to put a link on our class topic, or underneath this video, so that you can go directly to our shopping site and see basically what we have on hand, pricing, and even you can buy them right there from the comfort of your own home. So without further ado, I want to step aside for a minute and let Becky kind of like pan the goodness behind me, because we are in again, one of our hybrid classes where we've got a small live audience, but I have like millions of dollars worth of plants behind me. It feels like I have really a treasure trove of beauties on this table behind us. And Justin, why don't you just give us a quick tour? Just to point out some.
Kind of just on this end, we've got some really cool syngoniums over here. A couple different ones. They are super collectible right now, some really fun things. And then we've kind of blended over. There's some really beautiful anthuriums. Everyone loves all of the iridescence and the kind of velvety texture. So there's some really cool. This is Anthurium forgetii. This is crystallinum. This one they just call Queen Anthurium. These leaves, big long leaves, so super cool. And then there's some different philodendrons here. I do want to stop and just show a couple of things that are kind of unusual. I know we think of collector plants as being aroids and different things like that, so philodendrons, monsteras, but there's a lot of things that fall into that. So this is a super cool little ground orchid, actually. It does have a flower, but it's grown more so for the foliage. Gorgeous. And then this is super cool. This is called Pentagonia. This has got all of the velvet that we all love, and even some of kind of like that maroon color that's going on. But this is actually a tropical tree, and as it grows, it keeps this texture, but the leaves get larger, so it actually will form a large trunk and have all of these really cool leaves on there.
Can you show the name to the...
Yeah, so this is Pentagonia.
Yeah, nice.
Really cool plant.
And then we go into the philodendrons.
Kind of move on to the philodendrons here. We have those guys hiding underneath. But there's so many different philodendrons right now, and a lot of the variegated ones are what are super popular, but there's all sorts of just different leaf forms that we all love. This one is called Mayoi. This is Philodendron domesticum variegated. This is a highly sought after one here. The leaves get a lot bigger. The color will also turn to be more of like a gold color. Then we've got a beautiful white princess up here. White princess is kind of like the counterpart to our pink princess. So everyone knows pink princess, and that is something that we've been around for a long time. White princess is similar to pink princess, but it tends to go more on the white side. But every now and then you get the whole mix where you'll have white, pink, and green, and that is what this plant is highly collectible for, is having all of kind of like the multicolor in there. And then one last notable one is we've got this beautiful Ring of Fire right here. This is a super cool philodendron, kind of a self-heading, stays a little bit more of a bush than a vine. Really cool colors. The leaves come out orange.
Lost it there.
Shocking. Okay. We're flipping out over these houseplants.
Flipping out over houseplants. They come out orange and then fade to all sorts of shades of pink before going to like green and gray and white. Super cool.
What's this crazy one over here in the case? Everybody's really looking at it.
Are we talking of
the begonia?
Yes.
Oh my gosh.
So this one is a new one for us, and also something that not everyone thinks of as a collector plant. But this is super cool. This is called Begonia faro. Definitely, this is like a terrarium culture plant. Probably would not grow this just out as a normal house plant. It's got these super cool,
Are they chocolate
which
chips?
look pokey. They look like chocolate chips. They're actually, they're not sharp. They're just there. And then it's got these amazing stems
Ugh.
underneath too. So really, really cool plant.
Now, these leaves will get bigger as the plant gets bigger too?
Yeah, probably about twice this size is what you can expect long term on this plant, and it will form a nice dense clump
So,
as it grows. It does bloom, but it's not a very showy flower. It's
Yeah.
going to come up above the foliage and be a small cluster of flowers, probably a light pink or a white in color, but more so just grown for this super cool, almost alien-like foliage there.
What else
cool
you
just
got
like
over
that
here?
And then we've got some of our really hard to find collectors in here that we could highlight.
I'm going to come up close so we can hear you a little
Yeah.
better.
So this is one that we're all super familiar with, the Swiss cheese plant or Monstera adansonii, but this is the variegated form, which has been super hard to get for the last few years. All different shades of white and gray, and green in those leaves. Grows just the same as the other, so it's fairly easy to grow, but you just get like a whole kaleidoscope of colors as that one goes through. And then another one that has been kind of elusive and very hard to find until recently is Monstera obliqua. This one looks a lot like the Monstera adansonii, but with age you'll notice it doesn't really vine the same way. The internodes are very close together, and this leaf with time, as they mature, the leaf can be up to 90% whole and just 10% leaf, so you get this really amazing, almost spider web like maturity when this grows. So those are two really hard to find ones. We've got a couple of young white princess in here, so we had seen the larger one over this way.
yeah, and what's this plant you're just like pushing out of the way?
This guy is another monstera that's super cool. It looks like a giant Swiss cheese plant.
Oh my
Really.
gosh.
This is Monstera esqueleto, and it is known for these amazing giant leaves. Also one that you probably grow up a pole to get that real maturity factor as it grows. Very easy as far as rare plants go.
So before we go any further, because you've got, there's more rare plants and collectible plants than we can fit on our tiny little table here. But, I mean, if you're a little bit new to kind of the world of plants, or if you have, for various reasons, you've gotten yourself hooked on collecting plants and, just caring for and kind of surrounding yourself with plants. Justin threw out a couple of words and terms that I want to like circle back to and just treat this more like a class, so that we're learning something as we go and kind of soaking into Justin's knowledge, that he just kind of, casually refers to things like, it's a self-header,
Yeah.
This one doesn't vine as much, this one you want to grow up a pole. So we're going to get to that. But again, what the heck is going on? Where did these plants come from? My grandma never had these plants, she loved cactus and African violets, and my mom grew snake plants and pothos, and
Yeah.
there's the plants that I've understood and known all my life, and then all of a sudden in walks like the Rock Hudson and the Brad Pitts and I'm just like, you are not normal. I'm so amazed
Right.
at these plants. And so, of course, this is one of the, how they've become collector plants. But what's going on? What makes them so rare? What makes them such collector? And what's so hot right now? I mean, you kind of alluded to some.
Kind of a loaded question. So a lot of these plants are not new. They're things that have been around for a long time, but as Nicole was saying, houseplants have gained a lot of popularity lately, and people are really, they see all of the old houseplants that we've grown and they're going deeper, and then they're finding all of these things that are really obscure, and the term rare is kind of thrown around a lot. A lot of people, when they think rare, they think that it is endangered or there's not a lot left in the wild or things like that, and that is not necessarily the case for what we do. These plants are just things that they're not mass produced. They're things that they're very small crops. There's just a few people maybe that grow them. You can get one or two here and there. So in our industry, they're rare, but in the wild or where they come from, that may not be the case. And then also something that we want to talk about too is there's like a lot of talk about where they come from, and so they are not from the wild. So these are all things that have been cultivated. They're things that at
They're
one point,
artisan.
yeah, they're artisan things. We are not out collecting them. They're something that are coming from growers, and they're grown kind of all over the world. And that's another fun thing about these is that most of these actually are coming from overseas. They're coming from different countries, and then they ship them here, and then the growers are growing them out here in the United States, and then we get to what we see here. So a lot of these have had a long journey to get to where they are. And then once they're in the U.S., you start to see them cultivated more, and we'll probably see certain batches of plants come up more often or in larger quantity.
Safety-wise, though, I mean, of course, as they're traveling the globe on their way to us, they hit a lot of like agricultural and inspection
A lot of
points.
inspection
And
points.
then they wait
They
to
wait a
like
long time.
acclimate and things, right?
They do. So if they're coming from overseas, a lot of times they're very rooted. A lot of the roots will be cut off. They're
Right.
totally cleaned. They'll be treated with insecticide and different things like that to ensure that they're not bringing anything into the country. Then they go in transit, and that can take even up to a month sometimes, where they're no soil, they're in a box. They come to us. They'll oftentimes look really rough when they get here. And then so the growers will take them. They probably will put them in some sort of like a humidity chamber or greenhouse or something like that to
Recovery
recovery
space,
zone, get
yeah.
them going. And a lot of times, this is not the exact plant that came from overseas. They will have acclimated a plant, and half the plant maybe looks really, really bad. And so they're going to cut the tops off, regrow them, propagate them, get them to this point so that it's something that we are able to sell and show what the potential of these plants are.
So the grower kind of finishes the plant to the point where it's like acclimated and
Yes.
rooted and
Exactly.
like checked and cross-checked for problems and issues.
Yeah, so they've gone through a lot to get to this point, to get to us clean. And I think that is, for us anyway, where we see a lot of the prices on these plants, because it's expensive to get them here and to get them to this point. It costs the
Plane
growers
ticket.
a lot of money.
Doctor's visits,
Anything
vaccinations,
this plant has gone through. So,
passport.
yeah,
Yeah.
so anything you can think of.
Think about
Yeah.
traveling the globe and,
It's amazing.
miles.
Yeah.
Wonder if they have little, stamps in their passport somewhere.
I know,
that-
right? Their boxes get stamped, but
So I pulled this one because, well, first of all, I mean, talk about sexy stems. Is that,
This is amazing.
yeah. I don't know what's going on. Is there, do you know the words for this? Are there words for this other than amazing?
well, this is the petiole.
Yeah,
and
but fuzz,
I know it's
hair,
Can you hold it up
hair,
to the camera a little
whatever you'd
close?
like to call
Thank
it.
you.
So it's
like,
good.
like
Yeah.
me, this plant does not show
Fuzzy.
its legs. Amazing,
This
I think
plant
it's
is all natural.
awesome, yeah, all natural. But
Yeah.
also, if you show it close up at the base, you can kind of look, see the mechanics of this guy. So we can see that this little cut stem or trunk at the
Yes.
bottom has a little sidecar where the plant that's actively growing is coming out of. And now, if we follow that up, we see what, probably the first leaf. Oh, that's probably the first leaf, maybe second leaf,
Right.
third, and it's working on its fourth leaf here.
Yes.
And then he has, in the meantime, also started to show some aerial roots that are growing out of its little node.
Right.
And here again, aerial roots growing out of a node. So I show that again just because lots of us are learning to propagate at home or may, again, be familiar
Right.
with propagating on these plants. And so it's no different, and just as similar as Justin was saying. I mean, a wild collected plant, often would just be like dug out and, here you go. You wouldn't see all of this kind of the propagation mechanics right in the container.
Yep.
And then also and we're going to talk about this a little bit more, but I think this is kind of a unique container situation, but it's also in moss. So inside this little container, it's in a long fibered sphagnum moss.
Yes.
But we can see the plant's roots. I don't know if in, the internet you can see these plant roots, but they're running beautifully through the moss and have, it's rooted enough, of course, that it's holding all of this moss on
Yes.
its own, which
Yep.
kind of shows, again, a well-rooted cutting. But the moss is not soil, so it's something
That
that
is
can
correct.
be shipped without pathogens.
A lot of times, yes. So moss is kind of an exception. So sometimes they will pad the roots with moss.
So it's like the packing material
It can be,
and the
yeah.
media.
Depending on the country it's coming from, but
Okay.
yeah, absolutely.
So, and then I always thought that it wasn't good to have roots exposed to light. You know, like, is that an issue?
Not necessarily, and definitely not with a lot of aeroids and things like this.
Okay.
A lot of these plants in nature are actually epiphytes. They'll be growing on something, and a lot of their roots are exposed naturally. And so a lot of times we see these, and they can be a lot larger than this too. They can span down a couple feet or more, and it worries us a lot as houseplant people. It's normal, and that plant, those roots can take up moisture from the air, and they are something that is very natural for this plant. And where it came from, those roots will probably be attached to something, hanging down through branches or something like that. So that is normal, and the light really, in most cases wouldn't hurt this. I don't think you'd want to expose it to full sun or something like that as far as the roots go, but having just our normal light on there, that's okay, and it's great for us to be able to see what's happening on these expensive plants, because then we can know if it's ready for repotting, if the roots are unhealthy, if there's something else going on with this plant too. So it kind of acts as a security for us.
That is very
being
cool.
able to see what's going on with these.
Should you repot in the moss as well when you repot it, or?
We're going to talk about
We'll go over
repotting
that.
Okay,
in
great.
just a few
Yeah.
minutes. So I want to kind of, go through the
Get some of the basics.
get some of these basics, and then we're going to talk about repotting. We've got some medias to talk about and some of those
Yeah.
products that we use. So, so where they come from and why they're rare, essentially.
Yeah.
Not all of them are fast growing, and not all of them are easy to make more of.
Right, and a lot of them, something that we have.
Because I have a lot of spider plant babies.
Oh yeah, spider plant babies
Right?
are so good. But something like this, these have been around for years, and they've been something that has always been uncommon. They have not always been expensive as they are now. But the thing about these is that they have to be propagated by cuttings. They can't be gone through tissue culture or anything like that.
And that's because of the variegation.
The variegation is very unstable in something like this. And so you can even take a cutting, and 2 leaves down, it may either go all white, which is really bad because there's no chlorophyll in white, so then that plant slowly dies back, or it can go all green. So this plant is really hard to get a stable plant like this off of. Takes a lot of time. They're really slow growing due to all of the white, because that is a lack of chlorophyll, which feeds the plant.
It's kind of starving, right?
It is, in
Or
a
it's
way,
on a
people
diet.
look at it like it's on a diet.
Yeah.
It's on a beautiful diet.
Yeah, it's on a beautiful diet.
Yeah, but so something like these,
Oh, what we do for beauty.
so hard to get to this point, and
And-
that's why we see them very infrequently.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
So, are there seeds? Are there seeds? Nobody's growing any of this from seeds.
Some of it from seed, not many of these sort of things, but some of the more common things like our standard monsteras and things like that can
Really?
be grown
Okay.
from seed. Anthuriums can be grown from seed. There's a lot of crosses that can be made from anthurium. It takes years.
Yeah.
So to get somewhere like this is going to take you a long time to really have a nice clean plant that you can tell which variety it is and what is actually going on with it.
But that is then how some of this genetic
Some of it
variation
can,
comes
yes.
around, is through actual traditional breeding techniques where we're
Absolutely.
crossing flowers of similar genera and breeding to
Yep.
create bigger leaves,
Yeah,
longer
so
leaves.
some of this is done the way that we've done things for years. So a lot of these are natural. So these are all species that we see here. But now you'll see where a lot of growers will cross this plant with this plant, and then the seedlings come out different, and each one is different. So then they grow that seedling out and pick their favorite ones and continue to grow to see what they turn into long term.
It sparkles. It looks like a magic highway.
And hence the
System.
name crystallinum on this one.
Crystallinum.
Those veins they really do look like diamonds or crystals when you get up close.
That
in
is
here.
at least a pretty easy one to remember.
That's one
Anthurium
trick to remember this
crystallinum.
one. Yes.
And so when we talk about it, we don't tend to use the term rare, like you say. We really kind of call them collector plants.
Collector or unusual, I like to tell.
And just like art, or coins, or whatever it is that you have seen collected or collect at home. I mean, values change. You've got to stay kind of up on trends, and it's a like supply and demand kind of thing that affects pricing on these plants. And then, like freaks, for using a very kind and loving term, I love the freaks. But freaks such as the mutants, the variegated plants, they have like a built-in rareness.
They do.
Because of the fact that they can only be propagated through cuttings, like Justin said,
Right.
and not from seed, and not from
Yeah,
even division necessarily,
Yeah,
or anything like that.
exactly.
So when we see the referred to category of collector plants, again, Justin was mentioning a big category are aroids, and that's another one of those like umbrella terms of a group of plants that have kind of deep relationship
Right.
and a long back history with one another.
absolutely.
And we can talk about aroids still in sort of a larger what they like and how to care for them in general. But that would be just like saying what all humans like, for example, or what all boys like. And we know that that's not all the same, and all the humans in the world, we all have our own unique needs and preferences. So even within the aroid family,
Yeah.
we can, still find that there are a lot of specific characteristics of specific aroids one over another. But so when we talk about aroids, so I know philodendrons, right?
Yep.
Syngoniums,
Syngoniums are an aroid. Anthuriums are aroids.
Anthuriums, okay.
Monstera
Monsteras.
fall in that category as well.
Epiprenums,
Yeah, Epiprenum, which a lot of people don't know that is pothos.
Pothos.
So our old-fashioned pothos that's been around forever is an aroid.
Syndapsis,
Yes,
okay.
absolutely.
What else? What else? Are we like breaking it down to the right level for you?
Yeah, I know a little bit.
Awesome,
I've
okay.
done a little bit of research, but this is being
Sweet, okay, yeah. So and then, my.
Aglaonema or Chinese evergreen. These are
Aglaonema.
also aroids, so we see a lot of these.
Can you hold that one
as
up close
normal
too?
house
I'm
plants.
Thank
really in
you.
love with this plant
This
right
one is
now.
amazing. This is called Green Army.
Green Army.
Wow.
Really coming home with me.
I know it's like camouflage and straight and pink. It's got everything everyone likes. Super cool.
Wow.
So, okay, now, and this is what I do, and this is what I think. If I were collecting cars, I would read up on cars, right? I would start with like, I like the look of that car. What is it? Who makes it? Where does it come from? What are all of the models available? Is there a cool color that you don't see very often? Are there custom versions of this car? Who else has this car? How expensive is this car?
That would be my first question.
Resale value.
Yes.
Well, I like to dream. I mean, and I'm not going to let price squash my dreams right away. So, expense is in there, but there's also friends with cuttings. So often I'm not paying for a plant if I have good houseplant friends. I can trade something of similar value, or just because we're friends. So often, again, we're not all running on checks and balances on the finances of this thing.
Right.
It's an aesthetic, it's an emotional, my heart is racing. It's one of those, I have to have it
Yeah.
kind of things. And then, then there's the cost. And so my point is, we don't just dive in and say, I'm doing well with my spider plant. I'm going to buy a $1,200 Anthurium today.
Really not.
It's just not, it's not that slippery of a slope usually. And when I decide I'm gonna go into collector plants, I'm going to read some, I'm going to learn some, I'm going to visit some and see, you know, the whole range.
Right.
And learn everything I can kind of about it. Then of course when I take one home, like then the real learning begins, right? Getting to know
Hands-on.
it.
Yep.
Typically in average house plants, which I've taught lots of classes about growing the normal plants. We've got Justin in here for the specialty kind of detailed information,
Right.
but there's a lot that's just basic, like any
There
other
is.
plant. We take them home, we do at least 6 weeks of observation and orientation.
Right.
Yep.
Yep.
Gonna get to know each other. I'm gonna make sure that you like the spot I've chosen for
Right.
you, my light level, my humidity,
Right.
whatever you've got going on in your
Yeah.
pot, you know, that like you're
Right.
used to that and you're good with that. Then I'm gonna get into a little bit of a watering, you
Right.
know, like
Let's get the watering down.
schedule with
Right.
you. All of that is the getting to know you period that at
Mhm.
least should last a good 6 weeks.
Generally, yeah, I would say so. And sometimes the things that we think, we do a lot of research, we'll get home, we get this plant, and we think we're doing the right thing, and it tells us not quite. And then we adjust the humidity, adjust the lighting, the location, whatever it may be. It can take weeks to find that. And that's, I think, where Nicole is going with that.
Yeah, you don't know where you're going wrong if you start, you know, you get a new plant home, you
Mhm.
repot it,
Right.
and then, you know, you put it in the window, and then it starts
And you
to
think it's the best
curl.
window, and then you're, yeah.
And then I'm gonna water it more because it's curling, and move it out of the window because I'm afraid it's gonna burn. Oh, and then I repot it again because I was worried about the media
About the
that I
soil.
had.
Yeah, what
And then
you
I
put
went
in.
on the internet and I spiraled into
All this
all kinds of
information.
crazy.
Sound like me.
Yeah.
We've
It's
all
so easy to
been there. We've all
Yeah.
been there. And so again, back to basics is really a do nothing but observe your new plant
Yeah.
for that first
Give it that time.
month to 6 weeks. Then as you begin to get to know it, you make small and subtle changes to try to either appease
Right.
the plant by changing the soil, potting it up,
Right.
changing your watering, adding or subtracting light,
Right.
adding or subtracting humidity, all of those things.
Yeah.
But not like
Not all at once.
presto all at once.
Yeah. Takes time for sure.
So, what is, I mean, when you're a collector, part of being a collector is how do I showcase this collection? How do I display it that's both like healthy for the plants,
Right.
allows me to keep them in their best condition, yet also isn't like, you know, in a greenhouse in my garage.
Right.
So what's the best way to display these?
I think that a lot of collectors end up with something like this. We cluster a lot of plants together, we find that right spot, and then we've perfected the humidity, we've got the lighting down. You know, everything is just right, so then we can add things to that spot and kind of watch them, but we already know that certain things are working there.
Okay, so do you have tools at home? Do you have a humidity gauge?
So I do not. But
Okay,
you
but we
can,
should.
You can get them.
Right,
You should
right.
if you're dealing with certain things. Not all of these require the special humidity, but a lot of them do. But I have at home my humidifier. It tells me what the humidity is. in
My
that area.
humidifier. So yeah, you
Right.
have a humidifier.
I use a humidifier because I'm deep down the slope
Mm-hmm.
of rare things. So yes, so it tells me what the humidity is, and it tells me all the different.
And you're
Yeah.
trying for an average of
I go for 90.
50. Wow, 90% humidity.
That is not what is. They don't have to be. I would say 50 to
50
70
is-
at least,
yep.
and then go from there.
Okay.
And it's really hard, so I will say, you get excited, you buy a humidifier, you've got this spot, you want to grow all your plants. It's going to be really hard to humidify an entire space to that certain humidity.
Yes.
So your humidifier is going to be aimed towards your plants, and usually using like a sonic warm mist is good because that heat kind of comes down and falls down onto them. So that's often a great thing to do, but understanding that unless you're in a small enclosed area, you're not going to be able to make the whole space growable. It's going to be kind of making one area work for that, and then also all of these different plants, when we put them together, that's going to raise the humidity a bit as well. So having kind of a cluster, you can have trays of pebbles around. Some people mist. It's not something that I've done, but you know, it does add some moisture to the area, and it's something that you have to do consistently, I really think, to
Right.
get the effect you're going for.
Mister, this is
Yes.
so, you know, we're talking about misting. Everybody loves to, oh, humidity, oh, okay, like mist it. Or the other thing I get all the time is, oh, it likes humidity, then my kitchen or my bathroom is a great place. I mean, how many showers are you taking a day that you think your
Right,
bathroom
it's
is
very-
like that humid? You run a fan, you know,
Right.
it's not good for our house or rooms to be that humid.
Right.
So we don't want this to be in our entire space. And with the mister, and this is an awesome mister, watch
This is a
this,
great
like
mister.
super action, oh, I
Uh-oh.
filled it, but.
It's a nice fine mist as
Come
well
on,
when it
building
comes
up
out.
the- Yeah,
which we
yeah,
like.
it's so fine, you can't even
It's
see
very
it.
fine. Yeah,
Anyways, this is a great mister.
it is a great mister.
But we're talking about misting twice a day, at least twice a day.
Every day.
Every day. Wake up in
Yeah.
the morning, mist your plants. Go to bed at night, mist your plants. Every day
Right.
for at least like some increase in humidity.
Right.
But that can't even last all day long. So we're
Exactly
just sort of
right.
like giving them a joyous moment and then going back to the dry air. Running air conditioners and heaters also dries out
Dries
your
out
air.
the airlocks. You want to watch out for vents and things like that around where you're growing.
Not to mention, you know, maybe my bookshelf, my side table, whatever it is that I have these plants on, I might not want that to get soaking wet all the time either.
Right.
So, you know, now I'm down to, you know, a plastic liner on the furniture or something for my plant. You know,
Not really deep at that
right?
point.
Yeah, you know, yeah. That's so. You know.
Yeah.
But then, what about these cases that I've seen?
Yeah, so that's something that I was thinking about too. We've got,
Uh-huh.
I don't know if we want to just zoom in on this one because this is super simple. So we've got
Super
this little
simple.
guy to display some of our
It's just
high
like an
humidity
acrylic.
guys, some of our rare beauties, things that we just want to give the best care we can to. It can be as simple as having an aquarium with a top that you can adjust. One thing to talk about, so this was not made for plants, but it closes entirely. And so when you have something like this, you do want to give it air. So normally I will have this boosted up a little bit so that some airflow can come in there or open it from time to time to make sure. But you can go from something as simple as this to actually doing an entire glass cabinet or something like that. And a lot of those work really, really well. They contain the humidity. You can actually put a mini humidifier in there. You
Right.
can put lights in there. You can put mini fans in there for airflow. So you can really mimic any situation that you really want to do with that. And that's a lot of rare plant collectors do put them inside something like that. And it's great because it's very aesthetically pleasing. It keeps everything together. The moisture is not around your house. It's not on your furniture like Nicole was saying or anything like that. And you really can grow any of these in a situation like that.
My grandma used to collect glass animal figurines, and she had a display case, you know, like a round glass shelved, lit up
Right.
display case for her glass animal figurines.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, A, to keep probably grandkids from grabbing them and dropping them and breaking the, you know,
Right.
stuff. But that's, again, that's kind of when you have a collection, that's how you end up collecting and showing
Yeah,
things
it's funny
off.
how
So-
they correlate with different types of collections.
Now, I've seen like some of those cases IKEA has
Yes.
a good kind of range of,
Mm-hmm.
but I've even seen, so that sometimes you can like add weather stripping or seal
Right.
those cases up even further because they're
Absolutely.
not meant as a greenhouse.
No, they
or,
are not.
so you can seal them up just a little bit more and then again add strip lights or lighting
Yep.
easily as a home, you know, home improvement project. Run a humidifier or even just put a humidifier gauge in there and once you pack that thing full
Yeah,
of plants and
generally
some lights,
it's not, you don't have to.
usually
you
they're
can
gonna
do it.
bring their
Yeah.
own humidity up.
Yeah,
So, you know, these are some great, again, like you're making the investment both educationally,
Right.
informationally, financially. You want this to be an aesthetic aspect at the same
Right.
time and have something beautiful to show off. And as well, this creates a healthier environment
It
for most of
does.
the plants too.
And what's great is that it provides consistency, which I think is really
Yeah.
important for a lot of these plants. So, like
Like their
Nicole was
own
saying,
room.
you missed or you put it in the bathroom because you think the humidity is great. It's great for 10 minutes and then it goes away really quickly, and they've got a lot of jolts that happen. So
Right.
keeping it consistent is
Is
something that the cases provide for you.
Now, another thing that any collector is doing, and this goes back to basics, but even more important, I think, to reiterate on collector plants. I mean, all of us shop everywhere. If you're a plant lover, like you're a little busybody, visiting all of the suppliers. We go to all of the specialty nurseries. We know all of the
Right.
online sites and who ships and all those kind of things.
Absolutely.
So it's not uncommon that we pick up new plants from time to time.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that it is extremely important when you bring a new plant home to keep it apart from your other plants.
Yes.
It's really hard. I mean, like more than anything, I want it to be like introduced to the family. I want it to, you know, showcase in the
Showcase with some of
display.
its
I
others
want to
and-
see
yeah,
it and
absolutely.
see it all the time. But just in case
Mm-hmm.
either it hasn't been fully vetted
Right.
in its source, it could have a pest or a problem that I didn't notice.
Yeah.
And then I've been, you know,
You
now
brought it
I've
to your
sealed
entire
it into a
collection.
case, with
and
my.
given the perfect conditions for that as well.
So do you think like a week is an appropriate quarantine? 2 weeks?
I would say, 2 weeks plus, because
Yeah.
really, if there is something going on, sometimes it's really hard to tell at first. A lot of these plants have really elaborate leaves. They've got these petioles that have all the different sheaths and things on them.
Kinda hiding
Those bugs can
spaces.
be way down in there, and
Right.
it can take a while for them to actually show themselves or
Okay.
to get to a point where it's more noticeable. So I think that the longer you can keep them separated, the better on something like that. Bugs are something that houseplant people, it happens all the time. We find them. Bugs are everywhere. They can come from the store. They can come from your yard. If you've got a garden outside, those bugs are also feasible to come in. Spider mites,
Sure.
aphids, scale, all of that can actually just come, just from the environment. So it's something that we always, I think it's a good thing to check your plants maybe once a week to really look at all of what you've got going on, see if there's anything different that you can notice. Because a lot of times once you do notice, it's at that point where you really have to do treatment and you have to separate it out and you have to check all your other plants. So having a routine schedule to actually look at them closer than just looking and saying, oh, my collection is so beautiful.
Right.
Because I find myself, I go and I look at all my plants and everything looks so nice, but really like getting in there and looking at
close.
them. Yeah, which
Yeah.
is something that I think is hard sometimes, especially if you've got a lot of plants.
The more you have.
Yeah, the more you have, the more commitment it becomes to
You
do
have to
that.
break it down and be like, either this section is Monday, this section is Tuesday,
Right. Whatever
or
works for kind of getting in there. And I think that for me at least, I'm so excited about a new leaf. So then I'm always seeing these new leaves, and sometimes I need to, just check the whole plant and
rest
see
of the
what else
plant.
is going on with it. Because I think that we all love when our plants grow and we kind of focus on that brand new leaf and watching it expand and how big it's going to be in this one. But
so then preventative, like checking if we're doing like once a
I
week.
think preventative checking is really key as far as catching things early. And then I know that we've got a couple things here for us to take a look at.
Well, some of these plants we can just like know. Certain types of plants have associated pest issues.
Mm-hmm.
So you can just assume
That it may happen.
that it may happen somewhere
And
down
know
the
who to
line
look for.
and know exactly what the
Yeah.
most likely problem that this plant is going to have.
Exactly.
I mean, we know, just it's not like, oh, everybody's going to get aphids or everything's going to
Exactly
get,
right.
whitefly. It's specific to certain plants. So things like our large leaf monsteras in bright light or bright sun, the anthuriums in bright light or bright sun,
Yes.
spider mites.
Spider mites. A lot of these guys with these big petioles and stems, they're prone to getting mealy down in there.
Mealy
A lot of the
bugs.
monsteras are prone to that. Any of the really velvety things. So this is a beautiful philodendron.
Can you hold that one up?
luxuriance.
That's
let's take a look at
amazing.
this while we're here too. So this is
That one just shimmers.
absolutely
Oh my
stunning
gosh,
on
it's
the
like
foliage.
satin.
Yeah, really beautiful. But anything with this beautiful leaf is really prone to spider mite. You just know that is something that you watch
And
out for. It
What would I
happens
see
quick.
first of all? Like the first thing I would notice if maybe it had spider mites.
Maybe it might look a little dusty.
Uh-huh.
You may start to see some little spots on the leaf that you want to look closer at, and they are going to be very tiny. They're going to be kind of like a tan color, and it's going to give you kind of a double take, like what is actually going on there. You may wipe and find that that is not coming off.
Tops and bottoms?
More so on the top with these guys, but
Okay.
it can be in a bad infestation. You can get it on either side of the leaf. In a really bad case, if maybe you didn't notice it, and in the summer when it's warm, these things spread a lot quicker, but
Yeah.
it will actually have webbing that goes with it, so that's a
Really
telltale
fine,
sign.
though,
It's
right?
very, very fine webbing. It'll be pretty clear that it's not, a beneficial spider web. It's actually something else going on in there.
So if here's my philodendron luxurians. I am so in love with it, and I just want to give it the best life ever.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm looking weekly. I'm doing pest inspection and making
Right.
sure that it looks fine. Could I also do like a preventative neem wipe?
I know a lot of people do,
Yeah.
absolutely. So you could do it just from time to time when you feel your
Neem
collection
oil?
may be compromised. This is great. It's organic, which is wonderful for being in the house.
Old rag.
Yes.
Oh, again. I did not practice
We're not
any of my
having good
spray
fisting
bottles.
today, but
And that's when I turn it on, their spray.
yeah.
Okay? Just enough to wet the rag. And then all we're gonna do is, here, I'll just do it
Yeah.
on this little guy here. What we're gonna do is
Just polish that
Wipe
ever
the
so
leaf.
slightly.
be gentle. Sometimes you can use socks.
That works
Because
great.
that gives you, one to sort of hold and one to sort of wipe with.
Right.
And the neem is going to act as a little bit of a leaf shine, but at the same time, tops and bottoms will help to get off a little bit of dust and any kind of spider mite or even thrips or mealybugs.
Yes.
You could spray the leaf itself and then wipe it down, but again, this is an oil product, so any oil kind of substance can stain your home, carpet or walls or wood. So
Yes.
that's why I prefer the wipe technique. Or you can move everybody into the bathtub.
Yes,
And the
yeah.
bathtub is a great
Yeah.
place for houseplant care. Individual plants could also be like set into a garbage bag or like your garbage can or a bucket with a liner and then kind of spray directly
Right.
into
And then
the
really spray,
can.
let it dry off in there.
Sometimes I even seal it up, like I'll spray it
Oh,
and
and
I'll
give it the
seal up that
actual-
bag and I'm
yeah.
like, breathe it in, all you little bugs, and I don't leave it for more than like an hour or so, but that way
Yeah.
too. Neem oil has a little bit of an odor.
It does.
Sometimes I don't care for it in my house, and so sealing up the bag will also, help with that.
Right.
But we also want to make, neem oil, direct light on a plant, like sunlight on a
Yes.
plant with neem oil can burn.
Correct.
And then, like the shimmer and the velveteen and like some of this does neem oil. Like I know
You
on
can still use neem on that.
okay,
Yeah.
I know on some of our cactus, like blue, echeverias and things.
Yeah, anything kind of powdery, sometimes I wouldn't go for with this. You can use it on any of these kind of shimmery ones.
It's always
Also-
good to test like
Yes.
a low tiny leaf 1st just like if you're doing skin
Yeah.
removal,
Yes, and even if you're growing in a container or a cabinet or something like that, be mindful of the temperatures. So if it's a really warm day, your house is getting warm and you've sprayed something in there, the heat can react with neem
Okay,
too on some
yeah.
of these sensitive things. So making sure you know the temperature when you're spraying, so sun and temperature are something I watch out for when doing neem, just because in
Cool
there
day.
it's closed too, so you put it in there, it's hot, it kind of is stagnant in
Maybe
there
turn off your
possibly.
grow lights or like turn
Yeah.
them away for
Or
the
leave
day.
The door kind of wedged a little bit or something for some
Okay.
airflow.
So
But
neem.
neem works really well, and it's something that a lot of rare plant collectors use as a preventative at all times. Even bringing,
Insecticide,
yeah, insecticidal soap.
fungicide. Well,
Mhm.
it means
And neem is multi-purpose,
Right.
so
So
Like a
miticide, fungicide,
Yeah.
insecticide, so it's a good
Yeah.
kind of all around. And then insecticidal soap is one of those that actually will kill a bug on contact.
Yes, it's
So
a contact
neem
thing.
is a smother action.
Yep.
It takes a little longer to kill the insect. Sometimes you spray or, whatever, hit it with neem oil and the insect kind of wiggles and you think, well, that didn't do anything. So if you really want to, watch them die, spray them with insecticidal soap. You'll really feel,
Yeah.
like you've done the job.
Yeah.
Whitefly, mealybugs, aphids. This also is effective against spider mites, but we think that the oil typically is a little bit more effective,
Yeah.
being that it's a smother agent
It's
instead of
long-term,
a
yes.
chemical agent.
Yep.
You want to hit the pest itself, so the more coverage, the more likely you have contacted the pest. It's
Right.
not the greatest to just like hit the leaf, for example, with the insecticidal soap. And then I want to talk a little bit about the planting media,
Yes.
because that can make a big difference.
Mm-hmm.
A,
And it can
in
be
the
really
success of the
confusing
plants.
too. Yeah.
B, it affects our watering, which I also kind of want to talk about real quickly. And then what goes hand in hand with potting media and watering is another pest that most of us have struggled with, and that's fungus gnats.
Yes.
So we've
Yeah.
got, I think that 95% of these collector plants that we have, at least here at the moment, are in the long,
Yeah. The majority of
fiber
our
spike.
plants are in sphagnum right now.
Now, as we move into larger containers, the amazing White Princess
Right.
is in soil,
Yes.
and our Micans here, Totem, is also in soil. So we're into a nice chunky, kind of a chunky soil that you can see lots of bark bits and, kind of chunky pieces into. And so is the White Princess
It is.
into a real chunky mix. So when we go back to talking about, and as we all learn about, real chunky.
Help it all.
The aeroids, they don't like their roots to get squished,
They do not like to be compacted.
not compacted.
So you want to really aerate something that drains really well. Retains some moisture, but really they prefer it to have that moisture go through as far as what is happening with them. So that's why you see a lot of chunks and things in there, because that gives the roots airflow in the soil, because that's essential. They don't like to be compacted. They want to have that airflow going on in there, drains well, and it, it's easy for us to water in the house that way.
Right, yeah. And then we always, and this goes back to houseplant basics, we love to use the plastic containers. We like to size up into
Yeah.
the next size plastic container and leave our plants growing in the same thing that a nursery or grower finds the best to grow in, and that's a plastic pot.
Yeah.
So they hold plenty of moisture, they've got plenty of drain holes in the bottom.
Right.
And what we love about the plastic container is that we use the weight. We weigh them, just physically hold the plant
Right.
and determine how heavy it is, tells us how much moisture is in the soil.
Right.
I mean, approximate, it doesn't give us a percentage.
Right, but you can sense where you are in your watering
A
cycle.
plant
that
that
way.
doesn't like to stay wet should never be watered when it's heavy.
Right, exactly right.
So if we're doing a weekly check on our plants, we can go through, we have, of course,
Here I can
here, take that.
take this.
We have our decorative cash pot, where we've got no drain, well, this one happens to have a drain.
This one has a
because
drain
it's
hole.
Lovely, and comes with a saucer and
Yeah.
everything, everything. But
Everything.
we can have you sitting in a cash pot that has no holes, sitting
Right.
on your, antique bookcase,
Yeah.
or on top of the television set even, God
Right,
forbid.
wherever you were going.
Because we won't
Yeah.
have moisture, we won't, nothing's gonna happen to the plant. And then when it's Monday, it's time for syngonium or, the den inspection.
Right.
We're gonna lift it out of out of its decorative container, do a little weight check, maybe look at the undersides as well, see if we see moisture, how wet the soil looks at
Right.
the bottom of the hole, roots coming out, anything weird foliage itself for any signs of pests in good light. You want to do all your, looking
Absolutely.
in good light. So sometimes that's like turn the flashlight on your phone, because you're
Mhm.
already Instagramming the new leaf. So just put your phone on, get the light going,
Yeah.
you can get a good view of any pests. Now, I, have, what do you call them? Little small hand lenses, magnifying lenses
Yeah.
even. Because, wow, wouldn't you just like to look at the close-up detail of the Anthurium crystallinum in a magnifying glass? You could go on like a little, it would be like on a road map, to your dreams. You follow that little crystal road in tiny, tiny microscopic
Right.
detail. But all of that is also going to help you to determine whether or not you've got any weird little flecks of dirt,
Yeah.
or is that an egg, or is that a spider mite, or just
Yeah.
what's going on. So close inspection, deep inspection, well lit, weigh it, decide if it's going to be watered or not, evaluate its needs for repotting, which again we'll talk about, and then when we water this, because it feels like it could be ready, when we water this, we're going to show you kind of how we water. But if I were to repot something like this, is it best to try to go to the same media, or can I completely change it?
If you're happy with it, I would stick with the same. If your plant is looking good and you're having success that way, keeping it that way I think is good. If you are not so sure if it's working right for you, or you're finding that it's not the right watering schedule with the mix that you have, you definitely can change it. I wouldn't bare root this plant. You take it out, loosen up that root ball a little bit, take as much of the soil as you can safely away,
Some of
and then
fall
it'll
off.
adjust to a new soil. So it's
Okay.
not essential that it all be the exact same. But as far as if it's working, I would keep it. Just because that, the consistency is really key as far as keeping these guys happy.
So we can blend our own,
Yes.
and or we can buy it out of a bag, and that includes, so blending our own, Justin,
Yeah.
includes what? Tell us a little bit about that.
So this is probably one of the most heated topics when it comes to rare plants, because everybody has a mix that they like to do. But using something like an orchid bark and mixing that with a high-grade potting soil, and then maybe adding some perlite or something like in there for some even extra drainage, you could do like 1/3 of each to create a mix, doing something like that. And then Nicole is bringing over a really great soil that we use here. This is the Fox Farm soil. So maybe doing the orchid bark, pumice, and then 1 part Fox Farm.
Fox Farm is not as chunky.
It's not as chunky.
chunky,
Yeah.
but it doesn't have like the barky bits in it.
Mhm.
So we've got some perlite and pumice,
Yes.
and then there's some kind of longer
There's
fibers.
some longer fibers in there.
But-
This soil drains really well, and it doesn't retain the water for a long time. So that's really
Of
key. It's a
course.
great base to use. I use it straight on a lot of my plants at home, but if you're nervous, you're first starting out with it, doing this and then adding some other things in there, like adding this bark in there to get it to be a little bit more porous over time, is great. This is perfect size to get in there. And then, once it gets moist and it starts breaking down, you get different sizes in there, but that's really gonna add that texture to this soil so that the roots have more airflow and it doesn't retain water as much.
This isn't wood. This is bark. I mean, bark is wood, but it's the outer.
It's the outer.
So
Exactly. It's not like a wood chip,
Right.
a
Okay.
hardwood. It's the outer. It's gonna be a little bit softer to the touch. It will absorb some moisture.
It does act kind of like a sponge, but
Yeah.
it breaks down slower than wood does too, right? So it's meant to kind of stay in there longer.
It should stay in there.
Yeah.
Yes.
So bark as opposed to just wood or wood
Yeah,
fiber.
it's a higher quality this way,
And we're
for
not just
sure.
using like mulch from outside.
Yeah,
or,
exactly
anything
right.
Like that.
Yep.
And tell me a little bit more about the sphagnum itself. We sell this from time to time. I think
We
we're out
do.
of it right now.
Yes. Yep, we're sold out right now. We will get it back in. Sphagnum is great, especially when you've got younger plants or smaller things that you're trying to adjust.
And that
This
long
is a long
fiber.
fiber, which is great. The sphagnum is great because even though it's a moss, it allows good airflow through, and also sphagnum is like an antibacterial by nature.
That is
So
a
getting
good
this in here and having a plant that maybe doesn't have a huge root system, that's had a long journey, putting it in the sphagnum really helps those roots so that they don't have as many issues getting going. You've got the airflow. It's actually a great consistency to grow in. But the thing to remember about sphagnum, and I think that's where we get a little confused, is that it does not have any nutritional value. This is something you could take this out of here and plant it into a bigger pot of sphagnum and grow long term. But you'll need to fertilize a lot more regularly. Make sure you pick your fertilizer that you like and go that way.
So that's instead of soil?
This is a type of growing media
Yeah.
or in place of dirt or
Mhm.
soil. But so sphagnum moss, again, these plants, this is our whole world, including their kitchen. And so we've got to put food in their kitchen and stock
Right.
their cupboard. And every time the plant, eats through its resources, you got to go shopping again,
Mhm.
stock the cupboard. So this is a nice kitchen with no food at all. So we need to, think
Yeah.
about the fact that plants need a regular supply of nutrition, but they're also eating sunlight, right? So, okay, so that so you do some on your own, and some I have
Right.
to help kind of supplement.
Exactly.
Because you're in my house in a pot in a pot of moss. So during the active growing season, and back to basics. So if any of you haven't watched or need to watch our houseplant 101 class, there are videos out there for basic houseplant care and selection. But March through September is our active growing season.
Yes.
And once we turn into October through February is plants like time off. It's their dormant season. They deserve a rest for that amount of time. It's cruel. It's a cruel reality because that's also when we come in more than out, and we're like, I just want to dote on you, little houseplant. You're the only garden I have right now. But they're like, really, leave me alone. So we feed less in the winter.
Absolutely.
We water less in the winter.
Mhm.
We try to get all of our repotting done by mid-September
At the latest.
at the latest.
Yeah, that's
so
pushing it. And so if you have a really healthy plant and you're comfortable doing that, I would. If you've got something, that's a younger start that maybe you haven't had as long, I would wait until the next year. This plant is going to be okay staying in here,
awesome.
and probably better off for the plant too. So it's not trying to adjust as the light is going down and as we're changing up
To a
everything that's
bigger
going on.
pot with new soil.
Yeah. Exactly, it's going to hold more moisture and it's not ready for that at that point.
Now,
So how often do you have to repot?
It does depend on the plant. Some of them you can do yearly. A lot of these plants are actually really fast growing. There's some that are very, very slow, but there's some like these guys, the Epiphyrum pinatum. These are really fast. This is something you could probably repot each year. And some of it also does depend if you're growing it on a moss pole and it's got a lot of root in the pole. Sometimes there's not as much root in the pot. So you've got this whole secondary place for the root system to be. So it does really depend. But a good rule of thumb is like every 2 to 3 years on a lot of the smaller things and the anthuriums and things like that.
the way again I kind of look at it is, kids grow fast. We're talking about young plants. These are juvenile plants.
Right.
They're cuttings.
Yep.
And so they're growing fast, but once your monstera is 4 by 4, I wouldn't be repotting it every 18 months anymore. You want to repot it less frequently.
Yep.
It's hitting more like mature status.
Absolutely.
And I buy clothes like every 4 or 10 years. So, our kids go through clothes. Oh my gosh, please make it through this year with the shoes
Right.
you have and this size. Next year we'll, be able to button your pants again, or they won't be capris,
Right.
Because you'll have normal clothes again. But so that's the same with these plants. The young plants that are more actively growing, faster time of their
Right.
life. 18 months, 2 years,
2 years.
is great. 3 would be
Mhm.
like, well, you might be restricting its growth if you're down
Right.
to, repotting every 3 years. But then, my mature Audrey, my big fiddle,
Right.
I'm not repotting. I mean, I've got it in a 14-inch pot. How much bigger am I going?
Right.
You know?
And I think a lot of that comes to, in the house, we're restricted a lot more than when we're doing things in our garden and outside. Plants can be restricted for longer if you're fertilizing, and you can even take that plant out and add some new soil in. And something to mention too is like if you are growing in sphagnum moss, so if you have these little guys, something like this, the one thing that I haven't mentioned yet is that sphagnum breaks down fast. So right now, we've got these beautiful long fibers in here that are really allowing the roots to grow. But if you were to take this out in a year, it's going to be more compacted. And I've had some that will even turn closer to like a peat moss texture over time, where it's clumpy and it's not really nice for airflow.
So
So
you
if
don't
you're,
see those fibers anymore.
yeah, so
It's
something like
you know.
this, you watch the fibers, and then I refresh mine about once a year for the fiber. And maybe not all of it, but I take it out, I look at it, add some fresh in there to make sure that I'm not, letting that actual texture that they like degrade.
And then, so I'm gonna throw one more potting media out there that we don't have on here
Right.
today to talk about, but that's Leica.
Yes.
So we've talked about Leica are the tiny clay marble-looking
Mm-hmm.
beads that you've maybe seen plants potted up in.
Yes.
Been used with hydroponics and hydroponic growing systems for a long,
A
long
long,
time.
long time. But
We're
also,
seeing Leica grown, or we're seeing some of our collector plants grown in Leica.
yeah.
Is it mostly just because it helps with watering?
I think there's a lot of things that you can gain from it. It's a lot like sphagnum where it doesn't hold any nutrients, so you are going to have to figure out some sort of a routine
Or like a whole
fertilizing.
concoction.
And sometimes you have to actually feed the nutrients in there hydroponically, because when you have that, it has to have some sort of a water component.
Mhm.
You're not just going to take this pot and fill it with that and go set it on your counter. You'll have a pot inside of here, and it's
Like a
going to whip
reservoir.
up the water, so it's like a reservoir. It's great because it allows for good air movement, and also those little balls can contain bacteria and things like that, just like in a fish tank.
Oh, okay, so
When
they
you
can
get
have
the buildup, it
flowers.
can, exactly. So then you have a really active media that is growing.
Where the sphagnum is the opposite, it actually is more sterile to microbial life.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I mean, you
So-
can add it to it, of
Sure.
course, but with the way that it is being in water and having it constantly moist and wicking that up, it allows for those different beneficials to actually live on that.
Awesome.
Just
So
like
there's
if you
a-
had a fish tank and you put in little clay balls in there to
Yeah.
grow bacteria, it works very similar that way.
Awesome.
So you get a lot of really good things out of it, but it's also really, really different than doing anything like this.
So
So-
I have 3 philodendrons in my hand, and the 3 philodendrons are slightly different growth habits. And so I wanted to, again, circle back to a term you used, which was self-heading. And self-heading versus vining.
That is vining for sure.
So explain to me what that is again.
So when you've got the philodendrons in specific, self-heading basically just means that it's staying tight. It doesn't actually ever really form a vine that you need to attach something to, and it's like a head. It just stays down there, whereas you won't see the internodes be like this. And you can kind of tell when you look at this, this has so many more leaves than this, and they're all just forming a nice little round plant. And this has got a few leaves, and they're all a couple inches apart. It's going to keep going up. So this is something that's going to require a pole or something to grow on, where this one is going to be a really nice, tidy little full plant.
So self-headers end up wider
They
than
end up,
tall.
yeah,
usually.
so they're going to end up wide. These leaves can get much larger on this one, and they're very squat long term. They do form a stem, so as they grow, these older leaves are going to die back, and you're going to continue to only get the new leaves up here. Sometimes they'll send out some side or basal growths on there, but overall it's going to be short and wide. It's
Well-
not really going to require staking or anything like that. And
What
then
would
you
you
have something
consider the
like
princess?
this.
Semi?
It might be an in-between, and then something on the Pink Princess too is that they have finally been tissue cultured. So they're created in a lab on some of these where they take the tissue from the leaf and they add it to like an auger or something like that, and they can grow a plant from that in the right conditions in a lab.
So we're getting
so-
closer to mass production.
Yeah, and so basically these guys started as little tissue culture babies and they're really tight right now. Their nodes will change up, but they stay a little closer. They're not going to be really wily and crazy like
So
some of
they're
the
not
other
self-heading, but they're not binding. They're
more
somewhere
like the
between.
White Princess over here, which we can show again. That growth habit is more what we expect from Pink Princess as it grows. It's still tight, but it's going to want something to kind of direct it as where it's going to go.
And then we've got a real pole climber here.
And I think this is something that a lot of us are familiar with. The Michael's philodendron. This guy's been around for a long time. This one is interesting, and it's nice that Nicole brought it up. This one you can grow as a hanging basket. So this is something that's really great. You can put it as a hanger, let it trail down, or you can grow it up, and you get this beautiful effect where the leaves start getting larger as it grows up. But really versatile. This is one also that we talked about all the different conditions. This is an easy houseplant. You really don't have to give it a whole lot of extra care or extra humidity or anything like that. This is kind of a tried and true. It's just hasn't been as produced lately. It's harder to get. But you know, just like your standard pothos, this is something that is kind of a tried and true as far as plants go.
Kind of little Micans, but oh my gosh, they're so gorgeous.
They are so gorgeous.
And then still we get them like, we have them and then we can't.
And then they're gone. We're in a good phase right now, so
Yeah.
we have several sizes if anyone's interested. But just like Nicole was talking earlier with trends, something's going to be available now, and it's probably not going to be available in a couple months. It kind of fluctuates as things go on. So
This could go up a moss pole or
Oh, yeah.
just a regular, like,
you can just train it. with
regular,
a-
like rough
stick if you
hardwood
want.
or
Yeah.
rough wood.
Yeah, this guy is on just a raw stake right now, and it's actually rooted directly on here. So that's something about the aerial roots too that you can kind of see some right through here.
Yeah, especially.
So we're
down
kind of
on
not
this
used to
side.
seeing roots out and about, but in nature, these plants often are going to be attached right onto
You
something,
see.
and that's why they create them. And they're going to be able to take water through those roots as well.
So then talking about fertilizer real quick, and then we're gonna water, just to kind of get bottom watering. It's another one, like Justin was saying, with, you know, choosing your own growing media or selecting, what soil you like the best. I mean, you know, Levi jeans are the best kinds of jeans. Everybody's got their own opinions in that
Right.
sense, you know, and so you work with the brand that makes your booty look the best, or that makes your plants, you know, do the thing. And
Right.
we tend to have a few products that we use, that we recommend, that we have had success with, but that's not, that first of all doesn't mean that we've tried every soil out there.
Exactly.
I've blended my own soil just as much as I've used, you know, soil out of a bag. So
Mhm.
sometimes I think, you know, you're extra special. I'm gonna make a little special effort for you, and I'll blend you up something that you
Right.
like. When it comes to fertilizer, same. We've got options.
We do.
We've got fertilizer that kind of fits your lifestyle, right? So I mean, plants just gotta eat, and there's so many formulas of like, this is what they eat, and we kind of just, you know, reuse that same amount of stuff, nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, and we make it either slow release or liquid or one pump or measure or don't measure or you know, whatever. So for again, like I have, you know, 1,200 houseplants and 7 kids and 2 jobs. I'm not going to be doting on them with liquid fertilizer
Right.
every
It's gonna be
7
very
days
difficult.
or whatever,
Right.
and getting all my plants. So doing something that at least makes sure that they're fed
Right.
can help.
Absolutely.
In which case, something such as Osmocote,
Right.
or even one of our organic granular fertilizers that breaks down slow in the soil, something granular. Pink Label Osmocote, if you're familiar with the product line, is a better formulation than the Green
It is,
Label Osmocote.
yeah.
Green Label is 1414, this is 15912. So we're focusing more on the phosphorus, less on the phosphorus because we don't need blooms
Yeah,
so much
right.
for an indoor plant.
We want nice, healthy leaves.
But this feeds, it says right on the label, feeds for up to 6 months. So you can put this in at the beginning of the growing season, put it in your pots in March, expect it to, be there
Be
every
done
time
by
you
the-
water.
Yeah,
And then the plants are getting at least a basic nutrition. Now, that doesn't mean that we couldn't supplement them when we were
Exactly.
feeling extra generous with our time and energy.
had some
and
extra time, and
give
we're
them
actually
liquid.
looking things over.
So then we go to the more immediate fertilizers that,
Yes.
that have faster action. The plants get it right away, but
Yeah.
it also disappears quickly, right?
Exactly.
So this is like, I say this is like breakfast, lunch, and dinner. This is a full meal for plants.
Right.
And this is Starbucks and a candy bar.
Yep, it's a quick fix.
This is a quick fix, gives you a nice energy boost, but it's not nutrition that's gonna
Right.
be long lasting. You may need to revisit this nutrition more frequently.
Absolutely.
And if you have breakfast, lunch, and dinner as a baseline, then you don't, with this kind of nutrition, you don't hit peaks and lows so
Right.
quickly
More
as well.
consistent.
So now, probably one of the mellowest of all of these would be Joyful Dirt.
Absolutely would be the Joyful Dirt.
We can use Joyful Dirt in both in liquid form or as
a powder.
As a powder. It's got this spice cap.
Yeah.
So you can just flavor your plants a little, have a little here and a little there. So you can shake it right onto the soil.
Yes.
But it is very water soluble, very powdery, very water soluble. And as soon as I shake it on the potting soil, I notice as I water it in that it's like coffee colored water coming
Yeah,
out.
exactly.
So instead I usually just blend it into water right away and water in with it. But it's again, completely up to how you like to use the Joyful
Right.
Dirt. This is the houseplant blend, which is 312, which is like textbook fertilizer numbers.
Yeah.
Literally, straight out of the textbook, 312, 3% nitrogen, 1% phosphorus, 2% potash. That's what most houseplant ratios of fertilizers would be.
Yes.
Now, Fox Farm does a Grow Big, which is 644, and Dr. Earth has a 111. Both of these are also liquid fertilizers.
Yes.
They are concentrate. Well, this is concentrate. The Pump and Grow is ready. It's all blended.
It's ready to use. Yeah.
This is the ultimate, I want to go the extra mile, but I just don't have the time to do it. You just squirt this right onto the soil,
Yes.
and
you do want to
proceed
water
to
through. So
water
it is maybe at watering time if you find you have a couple dry things at once
squirt,
doing this.
water. And then Grow
Yes.
Big, we mix into water.
Mix into water, and water through this can also be foliar, so you can kind of sprinkle some on the leaves as you go too.
Put in your spray bottle if
Yeah,
you wanted to.
if you want to.
Do any of these smell?
The Dr. Earth has a very slight smell that does dissipate as it dries. So
A
it's
little
not
fishy?
like a little fishy, but very, very little.
Very
this
little.
one does not have a fragrance.
No fragrance at all.
Nope.
Big tomato on there, but
I know it's funny that they put a tomato on there because it's really not formulated to make big tomatoes, I don't think.
Yeah.
It's more of a growth formula than anything.
644. So
Yeah.
again, we've got a good ratio favoring nitrogen.
Mm-hmm.
And then if you were going to use any of these liquid fertilizers, you're going to mix it into your watering can. Either you have one that you brought in from outside, or you have a cute little decorative watering can. Most of the little houseplant watering cans are teeny tiny, and would never water 30 houseplants at a time. And so, you're going back and forth and you
Right.
fill it up, which doesn't make a lot of sense for measuring and fertilizing.
Yes, that's what I was gonna say, as far as measuring,
So-
this one is by the gallon, so
You know,
if you've got a small one,
I think this
it'd
tells
be
us
hard
it's
to figure out.
7 liters. Forget it, I'm not doing the math. It's my day off. I'm like unplugged. That's why I'm doing houseplant care right now.
Right.
I got good music on. I'm in my slippers. I'm not doing math. So
Yeah.
I'm gonna mix everything into a gallon
Exactly.
or a half gallon because that's the container that I've just, emptied, iced tea or
Mm-hmm. Right.
my,
It's a great
distilled
point.
water.
That is what I use at home.
So, and most of these things have a to the gallon
ratio.
measurement,
Yeah.
So I've got a I have a little silicone shot glass type measuring thing, OXOX or whatever that company is,
Right. Yes.
It's got like tablespoons, milliliters,
Nice.
ounces. It
Yep.
has every measurement you could want on there. Squishes tiny so I can pour into it, then pour into another
Right.
vessel. I'm sure you can buy that at the Container Store or wherever.
Yeah.
And then that's dedicated to my measuring. I'm
Right.
not using home, kitchen utensils to measure my fertilizer, but I'm not, guessing and eyeballing it either.
Right.
So I'm always measuring, and then I've got it into my diluted container that then may go into a watering can, but it's always labeled,
Yep.
plant food or whatever.
Yeah.
And
Which
sometimes
is
I'm ready.
good to remember.
Label it.
Labeling is good to remember.
Those of us that are familiar with Miracle Grow know that it turns the whole situation blue or blue-green or whatever. But a lot of these don't. I mean, if anything, it looks sort of like iced tea again.
Yeah.
So you don't want to be like, oh, how it's in Lipton. You
Right.
might, you might smell the fish right away, or depending on the blend. Well, you want to label it, especially if you're reusing a container
Yeah.
that was a food container. You want to definitely label it as plant food. And then when we are fertilizing or watering even, often, there's one. So often this little Crystal Hope
It's so
is on the
stunning.
dry side.
Yes,
So we
she's
can
ready.
see, here I'm tossing it in the air. It weighs almost nothing. I can easily kind of hold it with 2 fingers. All of these are us assessing how much moisture is in the moss in the container. And the moss looks light in color as well. So the
That's
moss is
also
going
what
to
I
change.
like about moss. For smaller things, it's really easy to decipher if it's dry or not.
Right.
There's the color factor, and I mean, this is light as a feather.
Yeah.
This is so light when you imagine actually having a plant planted in the pot.
One drain hole
One drain hole.
and are those slits? Air slits or no?
There's not,
Okay.
but we could put them in there.
Yeah,
It
yeah.
would not just like that.
So some house plants, tropical plants don't like their foliage wetted. It's not always that case depending on what plant you're using, but the furrier, hairier leaves, often those with that sheen or a lot of hairy legs, all of that holds extra moisture. So instead of
Yeah.
getting the leaves wet, I'm always trying to just
Definitely. As a rule of thumb for me at home, I just do as little moisture as I can actually onto the leaves. It just can lead to, especially if you have
Okay, so
really
this-
high humidity, you've got
Look
it
at
in
the
the
bubbling.
cabinet. Yeah, you can see that going through there.
So there's actually a little bit of bubbling going on as the moss is soaking up the water. We see it kind of pooling on top, but there's air in the moss. So as the air is going out and it's getting fully saturated, we see a little bit of that bubbling action. And slowly now the water's going to drain through. And you can see that that moss doesn't necessarily like grab the water right away. So some planting media gets either drier, plants that like to go really dry, like a
Right.
Hoya.
Exactly.
So once the Hoya has gotten so dry as it prefers,
Yes.
that the soil has pulled some even kind of away from the
Away
edge of the
from the
pot,
edge of the
and
pot.
it's really almost dusty looking. Watering the Hoya, it's just going to run right through, and you won't feel it gain weight. Now, look, I can look. It's like, oh, so I can't really hold it upright anymore. It's heavy. I can't throw it as high up in the air, and it's still draining through. But we've given it the opportunity to sit in enough water, both poured through and even in the little basin, that it's getting fully saturated. So often those that run through prematurely can sit and soak up the water from below until you can tell by the weight
Mm-hmm.
that the plant has absorbed the water
Right.
that you intended to give it, and that'll take you to the next watering, and not be something that you're like throwing a shot glass worth every day or something,
Right.
just because you can't keep it watered. That's just little
It's
sips.
not effective,
Yeah,
yeah.
little sips are not good. Now, we wouldn't leave this in here for more than like 30 minutes if it were
30
super
minutes or
dry.
so, yeah.
But in the garden center, and for those of us that have a lot of plants, rather than watering individually, don't you water as a group?
I do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
It's easier that
it's
way.
easier to water as
Yeah.
a group. So most of us, again, have larger basins. Think of like a dishwashing tub,
Mm-hmm.
a kitty litter tray, that like a cat bathroom, whatever,
Right.
all those things. That basin, low, wide, waterproof,
Mm-hmm.
it gives us space to lay out several plants together in that, water collectively, observe the water come through to
Right.
the outer end and sit in the basin
Right.
an inch maybe, enough
Yeah.
that it's over
Enough
the
that
drain
it's-
hole.
Yep.
Leave them. Usually I put a timer on because I'm so afraid that I'm doing,
Right.
10 things at once and I'm going to forget about them.
Right.
And then take them all out, drip them dry usually, or let them sit on another, towel or something until
Right.
they kind of drain. And then we put them all back, and then the next group
Mm-hmm.
into the same, situation. So we're watering, 8, 10 plants at a time or more. The manager, Jennifer, does a lot of her larger plants in the bathtub and actually puts the shower on, a nice
Right.
gentle shower.
Mhm.
She's got the kind of removable shower head. She can
Clean
close
it
off the
off,
leaves. And, make sure that they're getting fully saturated, sit and drain and drip dry in the bathtub.
Right.
And then they can go back into their, location. So even large plants can be, kind of
Yeah.
moved around. But I have a few of these just individual saucers for my big girls.
Yes.
And I will, go straight to the fiddle leaf, go to the Audrey,
That's what I
or
was
my
gonna say.
palm.
I bring my tray to where I'm watering.
And, the watering can, the tray, and sometimes, again, it's great to have like a coaster. So these are these wonderful cork trays that don't hold water, but they catch drips and drip, that kind of stuff. So you can have these either underneath your pots to avoid scratching the floor, or as part of just kind of this, or a towel, or whatever it is that
Right.
you're going around and doing your watering with. But then I'll take my larger potted floor plant out of the decorative container it's in, set it down in a basin for it to be watered, let it sit there, drain through, and then as,
Right.
it's absorbed the water, done its job, then, put it back into its larger container. If it goes back into its larger container and has still, let some water run through the bottom, my little last trick is I use a turkey baster.
That's
And
a
I
great
will
trick.
suck it back up so that it doesn't sit in water for the next week or so, that slowly is still kind of passively leaking out the bottom.
Right.
So it's just that, I have had that accident where you just didn't think it was still in water and it was.
still there.
And- Yeah, so
Yes.
the turkey baster is a great, you can get those at Goodwill,
Oh,
and just
totally.
give it to the garden.
Yep.
And so anyways, that's another great trick. With that, I think I know we've run over the hour, but way cool stuff to talk about.
So
and
much fun
way,
stuff here.
way fun.
Maybe we can just look at the
Yeah,
plants.
pan the plants again, and then
Yes.
we have.
Forgot the mosquito.
Oh yeah, that's for our fungus gnats. The mosquito dunks or mosquito bits is great for a fungus gnat remedy, and that can either be put directly into your water and watered in, or spread onto the top, and it's got just good instructions on the label. If depending on when and how long you've had some of your collector plants, as the winter arrives and the days get shorter and the angle of the sun changes,
Absolutely.
you may either find that the spring-summer location of a certain plant is not adequately lit in the winter.
Exactly.
So it may be time to kind of critically evaluate as the angle changes and you're into fall and winter, the lighting of your home again. I actually have a light meter that is something that I, sent away for and bought for checking different spaces in my home to see whether or not the light is enough for specific plants. And it's just like having a humidity reader or a pH meter or a moisture meter. And in my home, which is old and I don't have a ton of windows. Most of my windows face north, basically. So I have a lot of grow lights. And the grow lights help me put more plants into spaces in my house that aren't just clustered into the windows. So I can have plants in my living room. I can have plants in corners or up high where the windows don't necessarily shine. I have the Miracle LED, which is just a bulb that can be inserted into any kind of table lamp or desk lamp that points down. So I love this one clamped onto like a high shelf. It points down at plants that are on a shelf below it. LED as well, so very economical. And then I have a couple of this like higher end luxury grow light. This is called the Aspect by Soltech Solutions. Sorry. The Aspect is a pendant style light, still plugs right into your home electrical outlet and has a nice long cord and a timer. Because we run most of our plant lights, we run during the day and then have them go off at night, so plants have night or darkness just the same. And then the last thing I have is a couple of shelves in my bathroom that I do like propagation and seed starting that are just the bar style, fluorescent lights on hoods that are just easy, low, seed starting lights or whatever. So kind of whatever level that accommodates my plant's needs. Justin, I know you have some other like LED.
I do a lot. I have these at home right now, and I do these. I've got them actually in like pendant lights.
Oh, nice.
So plug
Okay.
in the wall pendant lights, and I put them in there, so it doesn't have to necessarily look bad. Because I know a lot of times if you just put a bulb in something, it's not quite right.
Right.
So that's really cool. You can really put this in anything that accepts a regular
That's
light
awesome.
bulb. So that's really cool. And then I do a lot of LED like strip lighting at home
So
too.
how long in the wintertime, I have sun, but in the wintertime, there's only sun for, 8 hours?
Right.
So you add to it, or have them on all the time? Or?
I don't change.
I don't
yeah,
change
so
mine. And so that's something we didn't really talk about either, but I run mine 12 to 14 hours a day year round. So a lot of my plants that are getting that adequate light, they're not on a cycle. So
mine runs like 5 a.m. to maybe 9.
yeah, I
So-
mean, I get a lot out of my lights, and so you may not see the same dormancy out of them as Nicole was saying, but they are going to sense the temperature change, and if they are getting natural light, they're going to know that the day is changing still, even though they have this on
Yeah.
them. So it is still, you kind of get your factors, but I have a lot of growth year round. But if you are not using grow lights, our light is so much dimmer in the wintertime that really there is a huge cycle that we see.
Well, in plants, again, even in a growth cycle, as I was mentioning, plants can eat sunlight, or artificial light, as long as we're
right.
giving them full spectrum. And they do photosynthesize quite efficiently, so that in many cases, they're storing energy, so that's like another critical aspect of the root system is to
Right.
store excess energy.
Exactly.
So just like a battery should be run down, before it gets recharged for better, longer battery health, that letting a plant kind of use its own resources in the wintertime instead of constantly fertilizing can avoid the
Yeah.
potential burn of over-fertilizing
Yeah.
and give that plant the chance to run down its own storage of energy and
Right.
nutrients at the same time. So, you know what I mean? Again, the more you grow plants, you'll notice that there's going to be leaves that die. There's leaves that'll turn yellow and fall off. That's totally
That's
natural.
normal.
It's like
Yeah.
we have skin cells that leave our bodies every day, and new
Right.
ones that are formed. Hair that is constantly being, for most of us,
Yeah.
replaced
Regenerated.
and regenerated.
Right.
So living tissue is not going to stay perfect and living forever, and so these living leaves eventually expire and are replaced by newer leaves and newer tissue. So expect and accept
Mhm.
some
Yeah.
leaf discoloration and, some damage to
Absolutely.
nutrition.
They'll tell you what they're doing. They're gonna drop a couple leaves. I mean, I find that running the lights year round, they still have periods they will choose not to grow.
Right.
They just sit for a while, and I think it is exactly what you're saying. They've got their energy, they've stored it, they're gonna sit and use it later on.
Right.
So it's weird. I'll have something that I feel like should be growing, and it just sits, and then all of a sudden, new leaves start to come. So it's really interesting.
You never know,
Watching
but you
these
feel
things.
blessed.
You feel so
nonetheless.
happy.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, with that being
Yeah.
said, we really thank you for watching today. I hope it's
Yes.
been an interesting session. Our interview with Justin Reed, and if you have more questions or want to come down and take a look at our rare plant collection, talk collector plants with Justin or myself, or really, we all like to talk plants. So just come on down and chat with us. We're at the Lake Oswego store, and we will put the link to our online shopping site for that collector's group of plants. But if you can't wait, it's www.shop.dennis70s.com. And as always, thanks for watching. Happy gardening.